She showed up at the talk, heard the chastity talk, and she said during Eucharistic adoration, God just poured in all these graces. She went to the sacrament of reconciliation. She's now recommitted herself to chastity, and she's even coming on the podcast next week to talk about this whole miracle.
You might have seen a really viral story because Jason Evert, I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, the greatest speaker on chastity, the church's teaching on chastity in the world, just was in Australia. And he was attacked by witches. A group of witches got together. Yeah, they call themselves witches, by the way. They got together to try and take down his talks. They called them all sorts of names. And they were successful in one school. But as Jason will tell you, Our Lady intervened because she was the scheduler of this trip, the Blessed Virgin Mary. So they had all sorts of miraculous things happen with amazing results. Jason Evert is here to talk to us about all of that right now. Stay tuned. Truth has a power of its own. It moves hearts and saves lives. It heals wounds and restores souls, but only if it is heard. That's why our enemies are working nonstop to suppress the truth. That's why LifeSite News is the most censored life, faith, and family news source in the world. They are working to keep you in the dark. They are working overtime to make you feel alone and forgotten. But God says, I will never forget you. God never leaves us without hope of victory. And LifeSite News will never stop sharing the truth that sets us free. We will tell the truth without fear. We will tell the truth without compromise. And as mainstream platforms silence us, we will build our own. That's why I'm pleased to announce the launch of the new LSNTV app, which can bring all of LifeSite News' top video content direct to your phone, tablet, computer, and TV so that you can bypass the censors and keep fighting with us for life, faith, family, and freedom. Don't be alone in the darkness. We've been canceled. Fight the cancellation. Download the app. Jason, thanks so much for being with us.
No, it's a joy to be with you.
Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Jason, you were just in Australia. Tell us about that and what took place.
Yeah, it was quite an adventure. I've been out there 6 times before, so this is my 7th visit, and everything's run smoothly in the past. But the day before I was heading out there, I started to get some news headlines and people sending me of like, hey, there's some protests on the ground out there of some people that are trying to ban you from getting into a couple of the Catholic schools. And I said, okay, I just started praying into it a little bit. And before I went to the airport, I visited a church and did mass. And then before a statue of Our Lady, did 9 memoraries and kind of just consecrated the whole trip to Our Lady. Like, this thing's yours, whatever you want to have happen. This is your trip, not mine. Let's go. And so I went to the airport, flew down. By the time I landed, things had really blown into quite a kerfuffle where there was a group of self-professed witches that were trying to pressure these schools, flooding the school with phone calls. Some of them actually parents of the school saying, we don't want this happening. Now, some of these quote unquote witches are just political activists that call themselves witches, but they're not actually involved in the occult. But then some people that we saw were messaging were actually involved in the, witchcraft and things like that, the messages that we were getting. But they were calling the hotels where I was supposed to speak, trying to get the hotels to ban me. They were, one of the events was ticketed. The tickets were free for this young adult event. But we only had 1,000 tickets. So they were calling and reserving all the tickets and getting online, booking all the tickets so that young adults wouldn't have a chance to go. But they were catching on to this and they kept putting them back for sale. The witches kept trying to claim them. So it was just nonstop opposition to the whole thing. So,
wow.
3 of the schools ended up canceling their events in person and instead turned them into opt-in, like a live stream event where the boys who wanted to see the chastity talk could get permission from their parents, and then the school would let them see this presentation. Meanwhile, this is getting picked up on their mainstream news station, all over their newspapers. These claims, this homophobic, right-wing, traveling, chastity, misogynistic preacher is going to come, and it was just nuts. I said, look, if the stuff in me in these petitions was true, I'd sign the petition myself. I wouldn't let my kid go to one of those talks either. And so 3 of the schools got cold feet, like, we don't want to deal with this. We'll make it just live stream to whoever wants to show. And then one of the schools like, okay, well, we're going to pipe it out to 8 different high schools and let those kids opt in too. And so we ended up being able to hit more schools in terms of the total number. I don't know, but the empty spots were filled in by a couple of other schools that were like, hey, if you don't want to have them, we'll have them. And so in the end, the whole thing got capped off with me on stage in front of 1,000 young adults. I finished the presentation, and one of the protesters got by security and dumped a can of tomato soup on my head in front of everybody.
Oh, no.
Like the crowd was like, ugh. And I said, okay, everybody, let's pray for this gentleman right now. Join me. Hail Mary. If we all started praying a Hail Mary over the guy, and he did not appreciate that. And security took him, dragged him off the grounds, and then he came back with 2 other guys with a hoodie and like a ski mask bandana over his face trying to get in. But our security buddy was in the special ops there of the Australian military, tackled them to the ground, and eventually was able to get these guys just to get lost. But man, quite an adventure to say the least.
Wow. It's not every day that you get to suffer for the faith but react to it immediately. It is incredible. You have the opportunity to share the faith, which is totally beautiful. You also had an opportunity that you weren't expecting, in that you had the opportunity to witness to receiving some persecution for the faith, accepting it without animosity, but with beauty. When you pray the Hail Mary, you've taken that scriptural, pray for your enemies. That's like heaping fiery coals on their heads. You did that live. That's just beautiful.
Yeah, the young adults came up afterwards like, I'm so sorry that happened. I'm like, look, I have 8 kids. I've had food thrown at me for 20 years straight. I'm like, this is what I typically look like at the end of the day anyway, with dinner with 8 kids. Like, it's so, but they said, they were really blessed to see, how I responded just by praying for the guy. It was funny. Literally 2 seconds before it landed on my head, I thought in my head, I'm like, wow, the talks are over. Nothing really happened. And then, then the whole thing gets dumped on me. But I mean, it could have been worse, right? I mean, it could have been like broccoli, cream soup, like, so it could have been worse. But but it was such an opportunity for us to intercede for that guy, because what you see from him is just anger. But anger there's something always under that, which is hurt. And under hurt is a wound that Christ hasn't been invited into. And so I think with all of our intercession for that man's brokenness, God willing, we can see him in heaven one day, and then we'll just tease him like, hey, tomato guy, I remember you, so love always wins.
Indeed, indeed. Now, let's get into some of the specifics, because I think they're rather amazing here. The name of the Twitter page and the pages that these people deal with is MF Witches, MFW for short. They call themselves Granddaughters of the Witches You Couldn't Burn. So very much self-professed witches. Yet, in Australia, the mainstream media tried to paint you as calling these women witches. Is that not the case?
Yeah, so there were people involved with this witch Twitter site that were opposing it. There were also just parents involved, moms involved, saying like, oh my goodness, if these reports are true, we can't have this misogynistic hate monger come into our school and just basically blame girls for a lack of male self-control. And so there was this parental outlash that was started, and the witches said, we're behind this whole thing. We're the ones kind of pushing this, and we're the ones who got the schools to cancel. And what was interesting is I had a little clip on Instagram when all this stuff started happening. I said, hey, just want to reach out to all around the world. If you could just please pray for this. There's a group of kind of self-professed witches that are trying to come against this. And I said, look, you don't need to worry, because I consecrated this whole trip to Our Lady, and thinking that some witches are going to ruin Our Lady's plans is like thinking, some house cats can overcome some Siberian tiger. It's really no match. And so that's what I said. So media took that and said that some parents are concerned about Jason speaking to their daughters, but Jason is calling these moms witches. Watch here. And then it just jumps in the middle of my click. Yes, so these witches, blah, blah, blah. So they're trying to paint me like I'm calling these women witches and I'm a Siberian tiger because their parents are just little house cats. And it's like, wait a minute. No. The media actually reached out to me. Like, do you have any response to these things? And I said, yes, parents are the primary sex educators of their children. And parents always have a right to opt out their child if they think that a message wouldn't be appropriate for them. And I said these things and I gave all these paragraphs of explanation. And then the article was run, at least in the newspaper, had all these accusations. And then it said, we reached out to Jason Evert for a comment. But they didn't include any comments, like not a single sentence. Because if they had, the whole narrative that they're trying to spin would be thrown off. So they just said they reached out for me for comment, but let's just not include the comments that might actually clarify something.
Unbelievable. And that leaves the impression that you didn't answer, because that's typical newspeak for we reached out for comment and there was no reply. Let's actually play that clip from the media so we can see the fake news in action.
The Chastity Project founder took to social media this morning, biting back at parents who have rallied against him.
Thinking a bunch of witches are going to overturn Our Lady's wishes is kind of like thinking a bunch of house cats are going to defeat some, Siberian tiger.
Some students at St. Joseph's Catholic College say they've lost confidence in the school, while parents are taking aim elsewhere.
What's challenging is that the school is under directive of the Broken Bay Diocese, and I think fundamentally that's where the problem lies.
Catholic schools Broken Bay and Jason Evert have been contacted for comment. Amber Griffin, NBN News.
So that's the fake news. Watch what it really was. This is where they actually took it from. Here's what he actually said.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's early in the morning here out in Sydney, Australia, day 2 of my trip. I wanted to give you an important update and prayer request. It's gotten pretty interesting since we got here. 3 of the chastity talks in the high school have been canceled by parents, and the ones who are taking credit for it, no kidding, not making this up, are actually a group of witches. And they are celebrating the fact that 3 high schools were able to cancel the presentation. But you know what happens when you consecrate a trip to Our Lady? She takes care of things. And so thinking a bunch of witches are going to overturn Our Lady's wishes is kind of like thinking a bunch of house cats are going to defeat some, Siberian tiger. Not much of a match. And so 3 schools have already jumped in, filled in the empty spots, and one of them is live streaming it to 8 additional high schools. So as a result of all the chaos and protests, we're going to reach more souls than ever. And so I would ask you to double up on your prayers and intercession, if you would. We've got 3 more high schools today, an evening presentation, more schools tomorrow, and then some young adults in the evening. So please keep those prayers coming and know you have my prayers as well. God bless.
Jason, it's really nice every once in a while to blow the lid off fake news but to see that this is from Australia's national news television stations. It's sad. It's really sad. They can't come up with an honest story, and they have to distort it. Wanted to talk to you about your actual talks. What is going on in the minds of young people today? Because despite this news, which brings us, you right now, because it did make the headlines, which is great. The central thing about your calling, is actually your own family and your 8 children, of course, and your spouse. But God has blessed you in a very, very particular way. He has called you to spread the truth of Jesus Christ, of the Catholic Church, with regard to chastity. It's like a central battle of Satan. In fact, Our Lady warned at Fatima that more souls go to hell, she said, for sins of the flesh than for any other reason. So you're called in a very special way. You've been gifted in a very, very special way to deal in this battle, this central battle for our time, for our age. And really, you've been gifted. I say gifted because I honestly believe you speak on it so powerfully. What are the most burning questions that young people have? You've been with them now for many, many years, but you've been steeped in this just now. What are young people asking about more than anything else? Hey, my friends, are you looking to see Father James Altman? I sure am, and I'm going to see him June 20th through 22nd at the Coalition for Cancelled Priests Conference right near Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You'll be able to hear from myself, also from Dr. Janet Smith and Michael Hitchborn, and many more. Go to the Cancelled Priests website at cancelledpriests.org to sign up right now before all the tickets are gone. We'll see you in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and right before we dive into that, I do want to mention one more new thing on the news cycle that was even worse than their last egregious, mischaracterization. They had a press conference at one of the Catholic high schools over there where they put a couple of girls in front of the microphone and basically said, this guy's coming to our school and he's going to preach this message of, homophobia and bigotry and hatred and misogyny. Like, this is dangerous. You shouldn't be exposed to this. Can you say that to the mic? So these girls are at the microphone and they're like, yeah, we need to be safe to not have to see and hear these messages of these kinds of things because this isn't good. And they're doing this press conference, these high school girls who've never seen the presentation at all. And they're spouting off how dangerous it is to them. And to me, I saw a little meme on this Facebook or Instagram where there's a dad holding a little baby. He says, watch this. And he bumps the wall, with his own shoulder. And then he's like, oh, and the baby starts crying, although the baby didn't even get touched. And then it flips and shows a mom, and a little baby falls, like bumps the head on a little pole. And the baby looks up to the mom like, did that hurt? And mom's like, haha. And then the baby starts laughing. And he said, there's so much power in how we train children to react to things, and as opposed to just letting kids see the talk and have their own intellectual abilities to discern, is this guy a misogynistic creep or is this the truth my heart is burning for? And so when we actually got to speak to the kids in person, one boy came up to me after the talk. He gave me a big handshake. He's like, man, the media is bull. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you learned that. That's a lesson you're not going to want to forget. And then they did surveys of the kid. And one kid, they only gave me like 2 surveys. And I looked at the first one, it's like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And it said everything they said bad about Jason was false. Thank you, Jason. One girl even messaged me on Instagram. She said, coming into your talk, I was really nervous and afraid of what the message would be. She said, I don't know at what point it was your talk. She said, I felt disgusted and I wanted to cry because I realized that everything they said about this presentation was completely wrong. She said, you have the most pure heart. Thank you so much. This is really going to change the way I look at myself. Thanks so much. And put a little heart emoji. And so the kids who actually got to see it responded in that way. They loved it. They're coming afterwards for hugs and selfies and pictures because I'm not there to shame. For those students who struggle with same-sex attractions, I extend the invitation. Hey, we're all called to chastity, and here's what this can look like in your life. And the kids universally responded like they did in the past 6 trips to Australia. They're starving for this message. And you know what? They haven't gotten it, unfortunately, in the last 40, 50 years of the Catholic education out there. Now they hear it for once. It's like, wow, this is the message we've been hungering for. So at the schools, one of them, we just invited students to come. They did like a Q&A. They gave us a room and twice as many students showed up that could even fit into the room. And we just sat there for an hour and 15 minutes and they asked questions like, well, how do I know when it's real love? How do I know that this guy is the one and he's not just saying it? One girl even said, is it possible to find a relationship where the guy just won't want you for sex? And so we spent time with these students. Afterwards, they just bombarded us with questions and, how do I start over? How do I break free from porn? How do I solve this situation? So their hearts are made for love. Their minds are made for the truth, and chastity offers them both.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's I've experienced the same thing. I also gave talks. I remember being in New Zealand. Same thing. Tons of kids, a lot of trepidation before they get there. And then after, you're stuck there for hours answering questions because they're supposed to go to class, but they're just too interested and stick around. It's amazing. The hunger is unbelievable. The falsehoods that they're fed is also unbelievable. And I think for a lot of our listeners, we've got to get the message out. The message that Jason gives, which is the message of the church on these things, is truly beautiful. And it works, by the way. And so the young people are hungering for this like nothing else. So Jason, if you could tell us, what are some of the main questions today that are burning in the hearts of young people?
Yeah, I think some of the main ones we get are, well, how far is too far? Can I do this with a guy? Can I act with a girl? Questions. I found with the guys, it's more questions about me. Like, can I still do this? How far can we go? With the girls, it tends to be more we. How do I know that this guy is the right one for me? Or how do I know he loves me and he's not just saying it? And so those are the types of most burning questions I think we get. How far is too far? And how do I know this person's right for me or they authentically love me?
And how do you answer that then with guys? Typically guys, I guess, how far is too far?
Yeah, well, I mean, first thing you want to point out is this is kind of the wrong question to ask. It's almost like asking, like, well, how close can I come to hitting oncoming traffic in my car without actually hitting oncoming traffic? It's like, well, if you value your car or your life, that's not really a question you're asking. You're more asking, okay, how much can I just kind of drive safe because what's here is valuable? And so we're starting with the wrong question. It's almost this attitude of, well, like if it's a mortal sin, I don't want to do it. But if it's a venial sin, well, I don't want to miss it. It's like, okay, that's the wrong attitude to have towards sin altogether. And so we've got to relook at our intentions. And so I want to wake up their conscience instead of just giving them a line in the sand, like on this side, it's bad, on this side, it's good. I ask them questions like, okay, you want to get married one day? Imagine your future spouse out there right now. Like, how far would you want them going with someone else tonight? Set the same standard on yourself to really think that through. I bet your future spouse is out there and they probably prefer you not doing this with another person. Just give them that gift of your innocence. And even if you've messed up, and you can start over. And I really try to drive home that, look, especially the women who think they're like damaged goods if they've gone too far, like, your value as a woman does not come from your virginity. Like, your sexuality has value because of you. You are the gift. You still have yourself to give. Even if you've made mistakes before, anybody can start over. And so we need to really make sure to pour in that message of hope to them. But when it comes to how far is too far, I mean, we're clear that like deliberate sexual arousal belongs in the sacrament of marriage. And is that a demanding thing? It is. But look, if I can't say no to my sexual impulses, then saying yes to them means nothing. And so it's this virtue of chastity that frees us to love, but then it also frees us to know if we're being loved. And this works especially in the favor for many young women and some guys with how they're getting pressured from girls. A girl came to me at a public high school in Texas, and she's dating this controlling, possessive, abusive older guy. And I said, look, he treated her like garbage. I said, just break up. You deserve better. And she said, I can't just break up with him. I've given him everything, my virginity, my reputation. I can't let go of it all. And I said, look, I know it's tough, but tell him no more sex. Just watch what happens. She said, okay. She took off her necklace and gave it to me. She said, he makes me wear this. He's so controlling. I said, okay, I'll throw it away for you. And she left. And 5 minutes later, she came back happy as can be. She's like, I dumped him. And I said, well, that was quick. She said, yeah, I told him no more sex. He slammed his locker shut. He threw a book at me. He said, where's your necklace? She said, I gave it to the chastity guy. And so you see what happens is she's just tested his love. Like, do you love me? Do you want me? Or do you only want the pleasure that you're getting from me? And so that virtue of chastity brings a person's intentions up to the surface. Because do you love me? Or do you just love the pleasure you're trying to extract from me? And I think if we explain it in this way to the young people, they go for it because they're like, yeah, I want to be loved authentically. And good people want to authentically love others. And I think these young people are good. They've just been marinated in a culture of lies and sensuality when their hearts are made for pure love.
Amazing. Have you noticed, you've been doing this now for many years, have you noticed a change? And what's the change? And what are the new questions being asked? Or what are the new concerns?
Yeah, change for the good and change for the bad. I think the good is getting bad, or the good is getting better and the bad is getting worse. So in terms of the good news, teen sexual activity rates, they've been studying it for 30 years, and they're constantly going down. Last year's the lowest they've ever seen before. So about 20% of high school students in America are currently sexually active. 30% have ever had sex, meaning most high school students in the country are virgins, and the majority who have become sexually active admit they wish they waited longer. It was kind of a disappointment. And so, but unfortunately, an increase in abstinence is not always an increase in virtue. And some of these girls are even calling themselves asexual now, some of the guys, but more the girls, because what they've seen of human sexuality on their phones and in pornography is so violent and degrading that they've come to the conclusion that if that's what I'm expected to be and to do, call me out. I am an asexual being. I'm out of this whole thing. And so we can't necessarily look at the number of increase in abstinence and just assume things are getting better. Now, there are things that have gone remarkably worse, from the pornography addiction, not just for the guys, but even for the young girls. One girl wrote me a letter and she said, you know, I was addicted to really bad hardcore internet porn and I finally got rid of it. And I haven't looked at it in 2 years, and I'm hoping I can stay strong. because she said, next year I'm going to be going into high school and I know the temptations are going to be even worse there. I mean, this is a Catholic girl struggling with hardcore pornography since elementary school. And so this has all come through the phones when it comes to the confusion in terms of what it even means to be human, the gender ideology, things like that. So much of that has been accelerated from Instagram, TikTok, and these kids, the anxiety levels going through the roof, pretty much paired with how much time they're spending on social media. One more bit of bad news, the number one perpetrator of sexual abuse against kids isn't live-in boyfriends or clergy or some creepy guy in his car down the street. It's 11 to 15-year-old boys who've been exposed to pornography are the number one perpetrators of sexual abuse against children because they're seeing it on their phones with no filters and then acting it out when their little sister has a slumber party with their cousin. I mean, it's heartbreaking stuff. And so in the midst of the mess, at least we know God wins. And when you give the kids the truth of hope and chastity, I find they go for it. I mean, Steve Jobs said people don't know what they want until you show it to them. But how can these young people know what they want if we never give them the fullness of the Catholic faith?
Indeed, indeed. One of the things that struck me, though, in what you were saying with regard to the good news is that the measurement on those studies that show more abstinence are measuring sexual activity male to female rather than, or male to male or female to female. In other words, in couples, they're not measuring self-abuse or masturbation, if you will, when it comes to pornography. And I think that's exploded so much so that I've had a couple of priests tell me, gosh, I wish they would go back to having sex again just because they are dead. What do you make of that? And do you think that applies to the study?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think a lot of this was accelerated by the isolation caused by COVID of these kids just disconnected from each other, locked in their room for hours on end on these screens without supervision. I mean, it's just a matter of moments and you get on any screen without any filter if junk is just going to start showing up. I mean, because the algorithms and now the AI behind these social media platforms that are designed to trigger your dopamine. So you're just going back for a hit and a hit and a hit and a hit to find this consolation and this distraction. I mean, these are extremely smart computer engineers, businesses, and AI knowing what do we need to show these kids to just suck them into this world, because the more time they spend on our platform, the richer we become. Kids aren't aware of this. They think, oh, they're just showing me the things that I like. But it's like, no. You end up showing what they show you, and then they lead it to become worse and worse and worse. And so, yeah, I absolutely see a linkage between those things. And not only, as I had said, just the guys, even the girls. And then when they're in these states of desolation, they go to their phones for consolation. I mean, perfect example of God's providence through this whole thing. There was a girl there in Australia visiting from the United States, and she was coming out there to visit her boyfriend. Now, while she was there, she discovered that he's been cheating on her. And when she found that out, she told me she was so desolate and heartbroken and done with it. So sick of Christian guys sending her little pornographic things. And like these are the good guys too, apparently. And she just got so sick of it. And she said, I'm done. I'm so tired of holding on to my virginity for 25 years when all these guys do is disappoint me. I'm finished. She got on one of these modern dating apps and figured, I'm just going to find a guy and I'm just going to hook up with him. I'm done with this. And so she found some guys. Then she said, okay, I'm going to do a background check on Instagram on these guys. And while she's doing background checks to decide which guy she wants to lose her virginity to after the mess of this failed relationship, guess what shows up on her Instagram feed is my video talking about people praying for the witches while I'm in Sydney. And she saw it and she's like, what is this? And she's like, wait a minute. I saw that guy when I was in high school back in the United States. And so she messaged me on Instagram and she said, your video popped up and I think it came at the right moment. I said, hey, I got to talk tomorrow night to all the young adults. It's open to the public. It's free. Why don't you come? And so I gave her the info. She showed up at the talk, heard the chastity talk, and she said during Eucharistic adoration, God just poured in all these graces. She went to the sacrament of reconciliation. She's now recommitted herself to chastity, and she's even coming on the podcast next week to talk about this whole miracle. Now, if the witches didn't start this whole thing, she still would have been on Instagram and that dating app looking to hook up and lose her virginity at the age of 25. But because these so-called witches launched this whole thing, she was exposed to this message and her soul, she said, was saved.
Whoa, that is so beautiful. That is It's exactly what the scriptures say. God uses all of the things that the evil one would throw to his good. And it's a beautiful thing to realize too that the fulfillment, we don't always get to see, but you sometimes do, of the scripture verse that says, all things work for good for those who love him. Horrible situations that happen to you have been turned to good. You're just so good that you see them right away, and you're able to revel in them as they're happening. The tomato juice thing is perfect. Jason, thank you so very much for being with us.
And I got to give credit. I just got to give credit, though. This isn't a me thing. As soon as this stuff started happening, I started reaching out to the Sisters of Life, to different cloistered convents of nuns. And I'm like, hey, can you cover us with some prayer? Send them some air support. I reached out to an exorcist friend of mine, Monsignor John Esseff, who's just like Yoda. And I'm like, hey, can you guys cover us? And they came in just big time with air support. I mean, we're the group, just little boots on the ground. But these are the A-10s. These are the stealth bombers. They've got the real ammo, the contemplation, the intercession. And I think it's a direct result of all of their prayers that all this unbelievable fruit and fruit yet to come that we don't even know is going to happen. It all comes back to grace.
Amen to that. Before we let you go, Jason, because I really do want to promote what you do, where can people learn more about you? How can they book you for their own conference or for anything like that?
Yeah, the website is just chastity.com. That's where you can go to book events or get our resources. We've got more than 20 different books on everything from chastity, breaking free from pornography, how to help people who are struggling with gender dysphoria, all those resources. We're on Instagram. My name is Jason Evert, or Twitter, Jason Evert, Facebook, YouTube. So we're always just trying to put resources out there to help give the kids something better on their screens, to discover the love that God has planned for them.
Jason Evert, thank you so much. May God continue to bless you and work powerfully through you to bring his message of love, of hope, of chastity to the world. God bless you.
You too. Thanks so much.
And God bless all of you. And we'll see you next time.